All right, let's dive into a cold case. And when I say cold, I mean really cold. We're talking almost 2,000 years old. We're going to use a bit of modern forensics, a little archaeology, and piece together the clues to figure out two things. First, who was our victim? And second, who, or maybe what, was responsible for his incredibly violent death?
So picture this. It's 1984. We're in a peat bog of all places, just near Manchester, England. For the workers at this industrial site, it was just another day on the job. Or so they thought. They were about to stumble upon a secret that had been buried for centuries.
So, as these guys are digging up peat, which was used for fuel, they hit something. And it's a body. But here's the crazy part. It wasn't just a skeleton. Thanks to the really unique chemistry of the bog, this body was almost perfectly preserved. I'm talking skin, hair, the works. Naturally, they called the police right away, thinking, okay, we've got a recent murder on our hands.
But when scientists got their hands on the body and started running tests to date it, the whole case just flipped on its head. This victim, who they soon named Lindowman, he hadn't died recently, not even close. He died way back in the 1st century AD. So yeah, this wasn't a case for the local police anymore. This was a 2,000-year-old cold case, and it just landed squarely in the laps of historians. Okay, Section 1, a 2,000-year-old mystery. So before we can figure out how he died, we've got to figure out who this guy even was. We have to place him in time.
So Lindowman is what scientists call a bog body, and it's pretty wild how this works. Peat bogs have this water that's super cold, acidic, and has almost no oxygen. All those things stop the bacteria that would normally cause a body to decay. It's kind of like the bog, it basically pickles the body, preserving it for centuries, sometimes even thousands of years.
And this timeline really puts things into perspective. Lindowman was alive in the 1st century AD. Think about that. That makes him a contemporary of the Roman Empire at its height. He was a Celt living in Britain at the exact moment the Romans were starting to conquer his homeland. Talk about a turbulent time to be alive. His whole world was about to be turned completely upside down.
All right, Section 2, rebuilding a lost world. We need to answer, what was his society actually like? And believe it or not, his own body is like a biological time capsule, giving us clues to piece together the world he came from.
And this is where the historian's craft really gets cool. You look at the clues. Okay, farmed grains in his stomach. That tells us he was part of an agricultural society. Simple enough. Now, culturally, we know his people didn't have native written records, which means everything, their stories, their laws, their history, was passed down through oral tradition. And politically, the fact that he was alive in 1st century Britain puts him smack dab on the front lines of a huge geopolitical conflict, the invasion of his home by the Roman Empire.
Okay, Section 3 is where we really get into it, solving the why. We need to crack the case of his death. So we know a bit about his life, but his death is the real mystery. And to solve it, we have to look at two very, very different kinds of evidence. What the Romans wrote about his people, and what his own body tells us. And right away, we have a classic problem for any historian. On one side, you have the Celts in Britain. They have their own traditions, their own gods, but they don't leave behind any written records. On the other side, you have the Romans. They're an imperial power, they're expanding, and they document everything. But, and this is a big but, they're the invaders. They're writing about a people they considered barbarians. So you got to read their accounts with a healthy dose of skepticism.
So here's our first big clue. It comes from a Roman geographer named Pomponius Mela, writing at the exact same time Lindowman was alive. And he says, and I'm quoting here, that the Celts were so barbarous that they considered human sacrifices the best and most pleasant offerings for the gods. Whoa. Now, here's the question. Is that an objective fact? Or is that propaganda, written to make the Celts look savage and justify a brutal conquest? Let's just put a pin in that for a second and look at our other piece of evidence.
Because the body itself tells a gruesome story. The forensic report is chillingly specific. First, he was hit on the head, hard, twice, probably to stun him. Then a cord was tightened around his neck to strangle him. And, as if that wasn't enough, at the same time, his throat was cut. Look, this was not some simple mugging gone wrong. This very specific, brutal combination of injuries is something archaeologists have seen before. They call it a triple killing, and it's almost always associated with some kind of ritual.
And this is where the two different threads of evidence finally come together. You've got the Roman account, which, is potentially biased, mentioning human sacrifice. And then you have the body itself, which shows all the signs of a violent, ritualistic triple killing. When you put them side by side, they create a really powerful hypothesis.
Lindowman wasn't just murdered. He was sacrificed.
So, case closed, right? Well, not exactly. And the reason why reveals something really important, not just about this one murder, but about how we understand the past itself. This brings us to Section 4, How History is Written. See, this is why you'll almost never hear a good historian say they are 100% certain about something like this. Archaeologists call this a strong hypothesis. And that's key. They're acknowledging that it can't be proven with absolute mathematical certainty. But admitting that uncertainty isn't a weakness. Actually, it's what makes the work honest. History is all about interpretation, not absolute proof. Think about it. In solving this one mystery, we've basically walked through the exact method that historians use every single day. You start with a question. You gather up all your different sources, written records, physical evidence, you name it. Then you analyze and compare them, always being critical. And finally, you form a reasoned conclusion, or in this case, a hypothesis. That's it. That's the toolkit for unlocking the secrets of the past.
You know, Lindowman's story was found completely by accident. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? His entire history, his whole world, was almost lost to us forever. How many other stories are out there? What other entire histories are still buried, right under our feet, just waiting for us to dig a little deeper and start asking the right questions?